This morning on Media and Society, we look at how the media has followed up on the alleged break-in, theft, kidnappings and interrogations involving President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala farm. We also chat about how journalists cover court cases, particularly how it's covered the Senzu Miyawa case. Well, hello and welcome to Media and Society here on SABC News, independent and impartial. My name is Naledi Molona. This is where we look at the intersection between media and audiences, and of course the show is not complete without your say, so connect with us via our social media channels and share your views and concerns about how the media works and what we feed you. Hashtag SABC Media and Society on Twitter, or give us a call. The number is 011-714-6841 or 011-714-6842. Well, in the last 2 weeks, President Cyril Ramaphosa has been dealing with a public relations nightmare involving alleged theft of money in his Phala farm. It seems the alleged break-in and theft of $4 million was never reported to police. Investigative journalists at Amapungane have said that they've been following the story since 2020. Earlier this week, the SABC spoke to managing partner for the Amapungane Center for Investigative Journalism, Sam Soul.
We did our investigation and wrote our story without the benefit of seeing Arthur Fraser's affidavit, which has since come out and been reported in the Sunday papers now and is also circulating on social media. We didn't have that, but we did establish with our Namibian colleagues that the Namibian authorities had become aware of at least 3 of the suspects implicated in this robbery when they made quite significant transfers from South African bank accounts to Namibian bank accounts in the region of 6 million rand or 6 million Namibian dollars. And they began investigating 3 of these characters. Then in June 2020, one of those suspects who's been implicated in the theft at the farm, a man by the name of Emanuela David, he crossed the border from South Africa to Namibia illegally. That was picked up by the Namibians. They arrested him a couple of days later. And then a couple of days after that, Namibian journalists, including one of our colleagues, were made aware by the Namibian authorities, by sources they had, of these rumors that this person had been involved in a theft at Ramaphosa's farm. We were not able to corroborate that back in 2020. It was the middle of lockdown, etc. But when the allegation came out, on I think it was on Wednesday when Mr. Fraser published his statement, we went back to our Namibian colleagues and we started digging. And what became apparent was that the Namibians had attempted to investigate further. They had even prepared a formal mutual legal assistance request to the South African authorities, asking for more information about three people involved, about their bank transactions in South Africa.
Well, remember that you can be part of the conversation by giving us a call on 011-714-6841 or 6842. On Twitter, use hashtag SABC Media and Society. So as Amapungane were investigating in South Africa, Namibian journalists were also looking into the story of the Phala farm theft. They allege that Namibians were held against their will and interrogated without involving the police. It also alleged that those interrogated are Namibian. For more on this, I'm joined by Namibian freelance journalist, investigative journalist, that is Mr. Tileni Mongudi. There's also chairperson of the Namibia Institute for Democracy, Kavena Hambira, and Professor Wallace Kumar from the University of Cape Town, who are all joining us now via Zoom. I'm going to start with you, Tileni. Tileni, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that you are one of the first journalists to look into the story. Tell us about the genesis of the story. What did you see first?
Good morning, listeners and viewers. You see, the story started in June 2020. That's when we first got a glimpse of it. But the weird thing was, this man was arrested. And it was sort of a big bust per se, because you had the police regional commander, you had about 2 people who were commissioners, a deputy commissioner, and a few senior detectives. And then we were wondering, but how is it possible that this whole big contingent of police officers are arresting somebody who initially we thought was just arrested for busting COVID-19 regulations. And then it turned out that, then we found out that, no, this person actually crossed the border illegally. And then we were like, still, but it doesn't explain how high profile his arrest looks like. And then eventually we were told, no, but the person is suspected to be a fugitive in South Africa. But then at the time, from the border, he was transported by a certain Mr. Paulus Ngalangi, who was actually at the time implicated or suspected of being monitored by the police for his suspected involvement in the Fish Rod saga, which is a multi-million-dollar corruption scandal in Namibia, which involves 2 ministers who are still in police custody as we speak, awaiting trial. So the theories were being bounced around until we started zooming into what at the time appeared to be a very far-fetched theory about Mr. Emanuela David being a suspect in South Africa and being monitored by the police, by the South African authorities, that he might have been involved in a burglary at President Ramaphosa's farm. But the initial information was that the Namibian authorities were alerted by the South African authorities about this potential theft. So we then started digging and asking questions, and then it turned out, but there's nothing like that. Obviously, at the time, I reached out to my colleagues in South Africa at Amabungane, and we tried to check if there was a possible theft at President Ramaphosa's farm, and we could not find any trace or any official confirmation of any burglary. So we then sort of started looking into it, but quietly. And that's when, at the time, we were told, but the South African authorities do not want this thing to be public, and therefore they decided that they're not going to pursue this because it could be embarrassing
Can I
to the
stop
president.
you there, Tileni? Sorry, that's a very interesting point. At what point, and tell me the time frames of when you knew that the South African authorities were not interested in pursuing the story. What were the time frames there?
That was around July 2020. And that was around July 2020. But because there was nothing confirmed in South Africa, we sort of decided maybe it might be, we were treading on icy grounds and on thin ice there. So we sort of just decided to park the story and see what would happen of it, because you have sources in Namibia sort of not clear exactly what they're not very clear with their messaging, but they're telling us that the South African authorities are saying that they can't let this thing go public because it's embarrassing to the president, and he would struggle to explain to the public why he had such amounts of cash on his farm. So, but it wasn't, at the time there was no confirmation. We didn't get any sort of confirmation that the Namibian authorities reached out to the South Africans formally or anything like that. And therefore we sort of parked it around July, August 2020. We sort of and the story went cold. The trail went cold. So we also just parked that.
Right. And we're going to
bit of
talk about the
information.
timeframes as to when it was time to release it. And I think that's going to be obviously the question that now everybody asks about, particularly the timing. But we'll talk about that in a moment. Let's bring in the chairperson of the Namibia Institute for Democracy, Kavena Hambira. Kavena, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us. I mean, the initial point here where we start from 2020 up until now, when you first heard this story, firstly, your initial thoughts, seeing it, and also what you thought about the role, particularly of South African and Namibian media in all of this. Kavena?
Thank you, Naledi. Yes, I speak on behalf really of the Namibian Institute for Democracy and thinking about other civil society organizations that are taking really keen interest in this story, this international story. And the very first thing I would say is a sense of shock. We're still taking a wait and see approach because information seems to be dripping out day by day, and some of this information is convoluted, so we want to make sure that we're separating the fact from the fiction. However, there is an enormous public interest in the story, and since it broke last week, a lot of speculation around who is responsible for the allegations that have been leveled against particularly President Ramaphosa and his Namibian counterpart, President Geingob. These are serious allegations. Some relate to bribery and kidnapping on the part of Mr. Ramaphosa, and on the part of Mr. Geingob, who is accused of, an alleged cover-up. This is serious. And, if Mr. Fraser's affidavit is run through the mill and we go through a due process, I think the public has a right to know the truth because ultimately this is about accountability, and we want to ensure that the truth sees the light of day, and those that are responsible are held to account.
Yeah, I'm going to bring in Professor Wallace Kumar on this one. He's, of course, from the University of Cape Town. Prof, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I think a lot of South Africans are watching this conversation and thinking about the timing. I spoke about this when we wrapped up that answer from Tileni. A lot of South Africans are saying, why now? I'm interested in hearing from you, particularly the confines that journalists really work from in terms of when stories are released and why now we're seeing this story released according to you.
Thanks a lot, Naledi. Look, stories happen, and when they happen, any good journalist will jump to get to the story. So this story, I think, for the media was God-sent, for many reasons. This was a time when, I think it was just after the ANC regional conferences having happened, and there was a lot of coverage around President Ramaphosa having his way to the second term being clear, and then there was this bomb coming, and obviously it was sort of God-sent for the journalists, but also more importantly, I think the fact that this the presidency has been mum on the story, that also generated a lot of curiosity for the journalists. Again, why is the president saying, no, I won't comment and I will allow due course to happen? I think any journalist would become very curious. The next point is that the fact that Mr. Fraser, who presented this story first, there's a whole political history, and in terms of ANC factionalism, again, that makes the story even more curious for journalists, and obviously don't want to pursue it. Is it a political ploy to stop President Ramaphosa from getting a second term? Or is this president a flawed character who really genuinely made a mistake? So there are a lot of different angles to this story, and I think, look, stories there's no timetable for stories to happen, obviously. So that it happened at this point is important, but I think what is more curious is the fact that there are so many unanswered sort of loose ends, unanswered aspects, elements of the story. Is the president so did the president commit a crime by not reporting a crime at his place? Is the president a victim of crime? Obviously he was, but beyond that, there's the aspect of politics, there's an international aspect as well, the involvement of the Namibians. There's also the issue of the Cape Town gang world. I think one of the alleged perpetrators actually hid in Cape Town and got the protection of the Cape Town gangsters. There's the aspect also of presidential communication itself. I mean, I think it's a nightmare now for them. So there are all these different aspects of this story. The timing, look, stories don't happen on a particular deadline. They happen all the time. It happens, any journalist will pick it up.
Tileni, I want to come back to you. Journalists at Amabungane said that they couldn't say anything until former spy boss Arthur Fraser's affidavit had been released. Could the story have been reported on earlier? And what do you make of how South African media particularly has dealt with this story that has obviously really gotten the attention of the whole country and also the region?
Well, the story was sort of reported. My colleagues here from the Republican did publish something. They sort of published a piece that is stating that, well, Mr. Emanuela David was arrested. I mean, he was linked to a robbery of some senior politician in South Africa's house in a senior politician's house in South Africa, and that police, there's some form of cross-border investigation. So the media here did, and I think my colleague Ronel Rademeyer has to get credit for that, because she was at least brave enough to put it out there, whereas we felt at the time there was no form of actual concrete confirmation yet. And so we sort of decided, okay, let's not tread, we must tread carefully here. But then when Mr. Fraser published the statement, and then we realized that what the statement is saying is very similar to the details we had back in 2020. So that's when we were now, like Sam said, we then went back and started now probing carefully and asking sources to help us, and that's when the details actually started coming out. That we were having 3 suspects first. At least 2 of the suspects their vehicles were intercepted in Windhoek. They were strip searched, and some of them spent a day in custody because the police were trying to establish this. Their money flow from South Africa to Namibia was tracked, and there was some form of communication between the 2 authorities requesting for information, especially from the Namibians to the South Africans, because the Namibian authorities felt there was nothing they could do unless the South African authorities say that, yes, a crime in their jurisdiction did take place, and there is a complainant and there's a case number. And that was not forthcoming as far as we understood.
I want to... So that's a point that you established a little bit earlier on. Let's start taking some calls on this one. And I want to hear calls particularly around whether or not journalists have given the story enough leg room, enough breathing space, and are you satisfied with how the media has dealt with this explosive story? Give us a call on 011-714-6841 or 011-714-6842. Give us a call right now and share your thoughts, particularly on how the media has handled this story. Kavena, I want to come back to you and talk about the importance of that collaboration between South African media houses and Namibian media houses, and perhaps the lessons we can learn about that collaborative effort on a more continental point of view.
Yes, absolutely. And even just before I dive into the crux of that question, let me just establish, particularly for your viewers in South Africa that don't understand the media landscape in Namibia. Namibia, when it comes to freedom of the press and the work of journalists, the work of journalists in Namibia is regarded to be sacrosanct. In fact, Namibia has been ranked consistently in the top two. I know last year, in 2021, they were ranked number 1 in terms of press freedom by the World Press Freedom Index, and they rank 24. We rank 24 out of 180 countries globally. So the work that journalism plays in underpinning our democracy and the work that journalists play in ensuring that information is disseminated ethically is really important. So there's an expectation, particularly from the Namibian public, that journalists will have the freedom really to do their work without fear or favor. I think this idea that the story has gone international adds an extra element of collaboration.
Right.
And, we're living in a time where we're highly susceptible to misinformation, disinformation, and it's really important to sift through the facts and to really verify and validate before we publish. So, I think that you can already see, to what Tileni was talking about, how they've been collaborating with Amabugane and some of the South African journals, and how, that sharing of information had really played a critical role in breaking the story.
Yeah. Prof. Chuma, when I come back to you, I'm keen to hear whether or not this story particularly, and perhaps if you look at the other stories coming out of the continent, are you confident that we're moving into a braver era of journalism? And this is essentially it, where journalism on the African continent slowly but surely moving away from political influence?
Thanks a lot. Well, you could say so. The collaboration between the Namibian journalists and South African journalists was very important. It has been noted and highlighted. But I don't think it's and of course many other cases on the African continent where journalism is really taking on power and exposing a lot of malfeasance. Social media platforms and sort of new digital ways of collecting news are making this even more possible. We could also talk about the role of citizen journalists as well. So we are in a period on the continent where both journalists, but also non-journalists, citizen journalists who are working to expose corruption and other forms of bad governance. At the same time, I think it would be too soon to celebrate. There exists a lot of systemic odds to good journalism, to ethical, journalism. This includes a whole range of things, including sort of the financing of media itself, which is declining, the welfare of journalists. In many other African countries, you still have issues around laws and policies which make journalism practice criminal in cases such as Zimbabwe, for example. So yes, we could say there is a general movement towards sort of braver forms of journalism and participation, but at the same time, there exists quite a lot of odds which present the sort of journalists, including political aspects,
that's a very honest,
technological aspects, financing, etc., etc.
Yeah, that's a very honest point of view. If Tileni will allow me, what I'd like to do, in fact, is to really dig into the process that you followed. And this is what a lot of South Africans and perhaps Africans don't understand. The process of being able to break a story like this is really chipping away at a story like this piece by piece. If I start to look at what that process looked like, did you reach out to the South African presidency? What did that communication look like?
Well, we reached out to the South African presidency, and obviously that was not the last point or the last place to look, because we first, before we make an accusation or an allegation and send such questions to the presidency, we had to first establish that, yes, indeed, something happened. So after the 2 years and after we've now established that, yes, there was form of communication, we understood that the President Ramaphosa sent an envoy to Namibia and he also directly communicated with President Gaingop. So we then followed up on that, and we did send a communication, and we just stated clearly that this is what we understood happened. Yeah. This is what the public statement by Mr. Fraser is stating, because by the time we sent President Ramaphosa questions, we still didn't see the affidavit,
right.
By Mr. Fraser. So we gave all the information that we understood, in the information that we had on hand.
And what did you get back? What did you get back in that information that you shared with the presidency? What did you get back?
At the time, nothing. They didn't respond to us, and we published without their response. I mean, it's the same for the Namibian president. We did not get any form of communication. I mean, from last weekend until Friday, when the presidency, the Namibian presidency, issued a statement, which was still vague and didn't really explain what was the nature of the assistance that our president offered or gave to President Ramaphosa.
And I'm sure that you're going to be facing more and more of these questions. I'm going to take calls, 011-714-6841.
No problem.
And the question we're asking, particularly today, is not around the politics of the story. We're asking whether you, as the South African watching at home, are satisfied with how the media has handled the story. 011-714-6841 is the number to call. Anonymous is on the line. Anonymous, good morning to you.
Yes, I'm on the line.
Yes, thank you so much for calling in.
I think what the media is doing is fine. They are airing the story so that people can hear and see what is going on. But the story really shows that this is an orchestrated act. Do you understand, my sister? It's being an orchestrated act because at the first place, this thing happened in 2020. Why has it not been aired then the way it's being aired now on the eve of the ANC elective conference? You can see that this is an orchestrated thing which is being used against the president so that he does not get the second term. And the people that they are being alleged to have reported this, they are known for conducting the covert operations. Like when you can hear that this Arthur Fraser, his history talks a lot. So this can be seen that this is being orchestrated and it is being ventilated on air timeously for the purpose that they want to achieve.
Yeah, I think you've made an interesting point, and it certainly is part of the bigger dialogue in the country around are media houses involved in the timing of when stories are released, and that's really a bigger question. And perhaps I'll throw it to my guests a little bit later on. Let's hear from Ernest, though, who's calling in from Johannesburg. Ernest, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for calling.
Good morning, and how are you?
I'm well, sir. How are you?
I'm fine. You're speaking to Ernest from Joburg, Bloemfontein. Ma'am, let us not play politics on top of politics.
Yes.
The media was supposed to reveal all these things, regardless of sections of the ANC. Who matters between us and the media? The people who matters most are the people suffering on the ground, and they need to know what their leaders are up to. I'm very concerned. I'm concerned about the professors and analysts who are saying the timing is this, the timing is that. Every leader, regardless whether it's is being caught now or whoever, everyone must be accountable because they know that they are being under competition in terms of leadership and the sections. Yet they still come into position of power and do all these shenanigans. We are dealing with the Gupta issue right now. But yet here is Ramaphosa, after he has been testified in the commission and promised that he will do things better than the predecessor, Mr. Zuma. And now he comes into power. And here we are being faced by these things. And he said to the Commission of Inquiry, he's going to do things better. But it doesn't seem that we are getting anything better.
Yeah. Mr. Ernest, thank you so much for calling. And I think you've made a bigger point around the actual political issue itself. But I want to sit a little bit on the role of the media, because the media, as you said, and as Anonymous said earlier, has the responsibility of bringing these stories to you as soon as they come out. As we wrap this up, Professor Wallace Chuma, Prof, the year that's coming, the period that's coming, particularly for South African journalists, what is it that we really need to be on the lookout for, considering that we're moving into the elective conference? There's a political storm brewing in South Africa at the moment.
Thanks. There's quite a lot that's coming for the news media. This story is not going to get away for quite some time. So we're going to have headlines around this Pala story for quite some time, all the way until the elective conference. In fact, it could be quite defining for the Ramaphosa presidency. But remember, the media is also dealing with COVID. It's not gone. It's still on our still part of our life. There is the issue of the economy, which is still a big issue now. I mean, the steep rise in the cost of living. So for the media, in addition to this political story, there is still the issue of COVID-19, which is still part of us.
Right.
It's the issue of the economy. So they should be on the watch out for that.
Okay.
But I think just back to this story, there is a sense that the leadership has betrayed and frustrated the ambitions of South Africa. I mean, this presidency kicked off with the issue of the new dawn. We're going to do things differently. And now you get a sense from the media that this year's, there's a great deal of frustration.
Right.
And I think there's going to be more of that in the media for the next couple of days.
Okay, I need to quickly get other thoughts from, just closing thoughts. Kavena Hambira, chairperson of the Namibia Institute for Democracy. What the region needs to be looking out for in terms of media freedom as political storms brew?
Yeah, we have to remember that, we are all married together through different treaties, particularly looking at SADC as a regional body, SACU, the Southern African Customs Union. And so, our histories and our future are tied together. And so the media really plays a role in the way that's going to be shaped. We have to be able to use the tools that are available to us to disseminate information, but also to hold our leaders accountable. So we need to keep putting the folks that we have elected, the folks that we have placed our interest to take our interest
in the hot
forward,
seat to answer our questions. Yeah, I'm sorry, I need to jump in there because I'm running out of time, and I think the point that you've made is essentially our job is to keep holding them to account. That's our job. That's our responsibility. Tileni, quickly, I really don't have much time, but what's next for you? What's your next project?
Well, the Ramaphosa Falafala story is still ongoing. We still digging. And we still have a lot of work to do and cover, because there are a lot of questions that remain unanswered. And we hope that we can get more info and give the South African and the Namibian people answers to their questions.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. We really do appreciate our guests on a topic that is really going to have South Africa, the region, and possibly the world talking for quite a while now. Thank you so much to our guest, Tileni Mongudi, investigative journalist in Namibia, one of those journalists who have been looking into that story, particularly chairperson of the Namibia Institute for Democracy, Kavena Hambira, and Professor Wallace Chuma from the University of Cape Town. We take a short break. When we return, a big topic again in South Africa has been the case of the murder of Senzu Miyawa. We're going to take a look at how the media has influenced that particular case. So stay with us. Welcome back to Media and Society. So, the murder case of former Bafana Bafana captain Senzu Miyawa is drawing a lot of international interest, and of course it's broadcast live on television. However, the attorney representing the accused says that she struggles to have private conversations with her clients because the cameras are always there and the sound never gets switched off. Let's have a listen to Advocate Zandile Mshololo.
Before I continue with my first examination, I would like to put it to the attention of the court, and I'm also asking the protection from this court, from the journalist. In particular, the SABC that has planted a microphone in front of me. As much as they have a right, be it a constitutional right, to record the proceedings, but also, I also have a constitutional right as a legal practitioner and counsel representing accused number 5 in this court. My lord, there is no right that is not subject to any certain limitation. I'm not sure about the order that was granted, if there were any terms and conditions under which the broadcasting should operate. I am saying this, my lord, because I have received messages during a short break, not today only onwards, but now, my lord, I'm referring to the one that I've received today at 11:36. It was during break when I had a conversation, a private conversation, a crucial conversation, my lord, regarding the documents of this case with the State Council. And we were recorded. And that information has been disseminated to the public, which is compromising us and is also compromising the trial. And that information...
Yeah, a very interesting point there made by Advocate Zandile Mshololo. Well, let's have this conversation. Remember, always keen to hear your thoughts. So give us a call on 011-714-6841 or 6842 on Twitter. You can also use the hashtag SABC Media and Society. So over the years, many court cases have been broadcast live on TV. I mean, it's not just the Senzu Miyawa case. You can go all the way back to even the Oscar Pistorius case. Well, joining me on this discussion is SABC specialist reporter Hasina Gori, as well as legal and transformational practitioner Mr. Thabo Masumbuka. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning to you. Hasina, let me start with you. When you saw Mshololo saying that in court, what were your initial thoughts as a media practitioner? Where should that line be drawn on how much we can actually access?
Good morning, Anna-Lady. I think that's quite an important kind of question. And I think at that point, I was listening on the live stream that specific day. And I'd heard kind of the conversation, but not actually paid attention to it. But I'd heard that the mics were on. And I think that what we need to remember is that I don't think that was maliciously done. I don't think it was done in a way to broadcast information that was, not meant to go out. I think it was really an error at that point. Usually what takes place with a live broadcast such as this is that the mics get muted once we're on break, or also is that we pause the live stream. That day it was just, if I remember correctly, it was almost like just 2 or 3 minutes, but it was a conversation that was not meant to go on air. And I think it was a kind of question of what needs to be done, how do we ensure this does not encroach on that right of us being in court, because I think that it's quite important, and I think all journalists that do go into specifically the courtroom knows that there are rules that need to be followed. Each courtroom sometimes has their own kind of formula that they work with, and we try our best within our rights to take heed from that and follow those protocols. So I think this was literally a mistake at that point, and it was more a thing of how do we ensure that this doesn't happen going forward, because it is an important case and it's something that we do want to ensure that we can bring.
Yeah, because it's a difficult difficult one, right? There's what's in the public interest and what is responsible journalism, and where that line is crossed needs to be a very clear line so that the media doesn't compromise the case itself, which is essentially what has been raised, particularly in this case quite a few times. Thabo, if I come to you and I say to you, when is a case a matter of public interest? I mean, could this been one of those court cases that takes place without us being in the courtroom?
Thank you very much. Let me take you to a day in time in history when, before the Constitution, when all we heard about court matters or seen was, there was this artist who would draw a sketch. Remember?
Yes, I remember.
Drawing
a
depiction,
yes.
A picture of an accused, depiction of a judge, depiction of a prosecutor, defense attorneys.
And as things played out in the courtroom. It was a drawing, yes.
Right? As things. Then, fast forward, 20 years later, we are now at the time and day where access to courtroom proceedings, and I call them courtroom proceedings because I want to deliberately isolate court activities from privileged discussions and consultation. Because if you look at the history of granting access to courtroom proceedings, it has always had those limitations. And Advocate Mshololo is correct. Courts want to balance two interests. The one interest is the interest of justice, ensuring that the public have knowledge and access to information of how court operates. But at the same time, fundamental to it is the right to a fair trial by this individual who stands accused, who, by the way, is presumed innocent at all relevant and material times.
And that's, so I want to sit on that point, because at all times we say innocent until proven guilty.
Correct.
Unfortunately, what has come out, particularly in this case, is the public discourse has exploded, right? And one wonders if some cases are, subject or influenced somehow by the public interest, and what the public discourse becomes in this particular case. I'm going to come to you on this one. Does the public discourse, do you think, impact what comes into the courtroom or vice versa?
So there are two types of courts in this country. There's a real court, which is a judicial process. Yes. Then there's a court of public opinion. All right? So usually access to such cases, Oscar Pretorius, Senzu Miyawa, and many others, you're right? There was the case of, the court actually laid out the principle in the Van Braden case. If you remember the Van Braden case, is the one case in Stellenbosch where this fellow was accused of butchering his family, and only the sister was surviving, and she was in hospital for so many months. So the court said in that case, when the media was actually applying for access, said it is important to publicize the proceedings to the extent that, one, they're educational, and two, they reassure the public that justice will be served. But it set out the limitations. There are times, that is why even when the case is, cameras must be positioned at a certain way, at a certain level. There are certain, for instance, you can see the judge writing, but the camera can't zoom into what is writing.
Can you, because you've seen these processes, right? What are those limitations? When have we crossed the line? And is there really accountability for when we do, right? When is what the media does compromising the case itself, and is there a real legislation and controls around how that's dealt with?
So I think, as Thabo mentioned, some of the rules, like most of us know, ensure that you're there 15 minutes, your camera is placed in a space that you can't move around, that, whoever you need to get, you'd be able to ensure that the mics are there. You also normally get, some kind of a guidance from the court, some cases where the prosecutor, in the Sekofatso Pule case, the prosecutor from the state had told us us he does not want to be, seen on, air. We can use his voice, but he does not want to be on. Yes. We've seen where the defense sometimes says that. We've seen some where the accused have said they don't want to be, or other judges saying we don't want. Specifically, I think in the Pule matter, we saw that a lot, where the judge had put a stringent rules and measures in place, and he would ensure that there was accountability. I think that for most cases, like we saw, when this matter was raised by Advocate Mshololo, a discussion then being had with the media to ensure that everyone, follows a due course. We do have, some cases where some do try their luck, but I think for most cases, I know in this matter specifically, the pictures and the images that they were being used as evidence, we were not allowed to show them right until the big screen was put up, and then also we're told don't take any photos in court, but you can broadcast this. So I think at some times we as the media do try to push that, but there isn't any legislation really in space.
Yeah, I'm interested in the 1010 situation, right? I mean, that was brought up by some of the legal representatives, essentially saying that has impacted even on the safety of witnesses. And I'm keen to hear your thoughts on that. Quickly, though, let's take a call. Nati, I think Nati's in Durban. Nati, good morning to you. Nati, good morning. Okay, can't hear Nati at the moment, but I'll take a few more calls. 0117146841. What do you make of that issue, particularly around 1010 and the argument that the publicizing of that documentary even impacted on the safety of witnesses and how that influences how the media operates moving forward?
Look, it's a chicken and an egg situation. Which one comes first? Because let me tell you why. Eventually, in all bigger scheme of things and all circumference of circumstances, what's going to happen is that... Okay, all right. So what's going to happen is that 1010, whoever is going to have access to public footage. Whether they regenerate that into Netflix at the later stage or not is neither here nor there. So what is fundamental is that is access to the court proceedings compromising the rights of the accused? That's a big question that the court always asks. And if the answer is yes, the court will always lean in favor of the accused persons, because the right to for the public to know information about the case cannot supersede the fundamental right of the accused persons to have access to a fair trial. That is why what Advocate Mshololo raised about encrypting, the media's encrypting of the access, and be able to get access to consultations, private conversation, that's not part of what the public should have access to. The public should have access to the educational aspect, the processes in court, access to justice, how the court, especially during sentencing times, as we heard before, especially in that case of is it Tsegofaso? The Tsegofaso Pule case. The courts are always strict on ensuring that the public should get the message about the consequences of crime.
Yeah, I mean, that's confidence building, right? It's very confidence in the capabilities of media, yeah.
And I think that in a time where there's so much of mistrust around the judiciary and the processes, it also helps people understand what's happening, because, in the court of public opinion, sometimes they will sentence or say certain things, and this is a space to really educate what exactly takes place. And we saw that specifically with the sentencing. But going with the 1010, and I think following from that, I think one of the issues that were raised by Advocate Tefo specifically was that that documentary, it's not about them having access now. It was access with that documentary that was already aired. And we heard Judge Maumela saying that is a process that is outside of his courtroom. Yeah. If they feel that there were laws that were broken and that they overstepped, and the media did overstep with specifically that documentary, they should open up the criminal charges and pursue that specifically.
Before I let you guys go, here's the reality. This is a court case and a story, a tragedy, in fact, that South Africa's been following since 2014. Can you both confidently say, as we wrap up this discussion, that the media will not get in the way of justice? That's really what South Africans want to know. I'll start with you, Hasina.
I think that's a question specifically that many media are looking at. And I think the way we've handled it, if you've seen, it's mainly handling and reporting on the court proceedings. There haven't been any interviews with any key witnesses from traditional media. Outside of that 1010 documentary, you haven't seen, the other accused or those that were in the house being bombarded or trying. There hasn't been the story on the sideline outside of the courtroom. So I really think there has been a push from specifically, I think, the SABC and other traditional media to really just tell what's happening in the courtroom and allow people to understand, as Thabo was saying, that
Are you confident of that as well, that media won't get in the way of justice?
The media cannot. It's unable to, because what the media is, in fact, is just a bystander on behalf of the public. In fact, what we have seen, more than anything else, some of the purported suspects in the case have been publicly self-posturing in other platforms, if you know what I mean. No names mentioned. But what I'm trying to say is that the media has just been reporting what she's correct. Hasina is correct.
Yes.
Reporting on what has been the development in the courtroom,
as they should be.
in terms of, in reference to
doing our jobs,
doing
our jobs,
different types of dockets. There are now two dockets. I don't know if there's any. There's probably a third one as well. We'll never know.
Listen, don't start with that. Let's leave it there. Thank you so much for speaking to us. We really do appreciate your time. Legal and transformational practitioner and also colourful speaker there, Mr. Thabo Masumbuka, as well as SABC specialist reporter Hasina Ngori. Thank you so much for watching our show, Media and Society. We hope that you'll join us again, same time, same place next week. From me and the rest of the team, a good day to you, and have yourselves a blessed Sunday.